Brunson.
Thanks, bud. Let's go down. Well, thank you for joining us today. Andrew, thank you so much for being here. I know you made a special trip just to be with us, and just to see you is amazing, because I'm one of those with other pastors in the EPC who are praying for you, and praise God.
Thank you.
So where were you last year this time?
Last year at this time, I was in the Buca Maximum Security Prison in Turkey. So this is a much better place to be.
I'm sure. Can you just tell us a little bit about why you were in Turkey in the first place?
It's very simple. Turkey is the largest unevangelized country in the world, and we were there to tell people about Jesus.
Mm-hmm. And you'd been there many years before this happened. Was this a potential threat that you thought about, or did it surprise you?
It very much surprised me, because up until my arrest, nobody had been arrested as a missionary there.
Yeah. And so how did that take place? Describe just the event of the arrest and the interruption of your life.
Yeah, so we qualified to have a long-term residence permit, which means we would be able to live there until 2099. So we thought that we had applied for this, and we went to, we thought we were picking up our papers at the local police station, and instead they informed us that we were going to be deported. So they arrested Noreen and me for deportation, but after 13 days they let her go, and they kept me.
2099? They had...
Yeah, that's just the number they put on.
That's a big number.
A long-term visa.
That's a long time.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. And when they arrested you, what did they say? Why?
They told us I was a threat to national security, and what they did over time, they kept changing the reasons. So they said we were involved in human trafficking, threat to national security, then that I was involved with the Fethullah Gulen movement, which Turkey accused of planning a coup, then that I was in Syria working with the PKK, which is a Kurdish terrorist group, then that I was insulting Turkey, then they said I was involved in espionage, military espionage, and later that I helped to plan the coup. So it kept changing along the way. But the reasons, the charges against me were very different from the real reasons they were holding me. So I believe the reason they kept me is because they wanted to make an example of someone, to intimidate other missionaries, to intimidate local Christians. And as it developed, then I became a way to use somebody to use for leverage, to try to get some things from the United States, and then somebody used the word hostage diplomacy. This is how they used me.
And you got called all kinds of interesting names in the press, and accusing you. You were sharing some of them at our General Assembly a few weeks back.
Yes, the spy priest, dark priest, and my favorite was Rambo priest.
Rambo priest. Rambo priest. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Well, when did it dawn on you that this might be for a long time, that this wasn't going to be a short time? Tell us what went through your mind.
Well, several times this happened. It was kind of a roller coaster, but when they put me into a high security prison, that was a clue. And then when President Trump asked for me at a summit with President Erdogan, he asked for my return 3 times, and they didn't return me. So I thought, well, this is as high as it can go, and they're still keeping me. And then another time, they charged me with crimes that would require 3 life sentences in solitary confinement with no possibility of parole. So there I thought that it might extend. Yes.
Wow. Were you aware? I know 2 years is a long time, and many different things go through your mind in that time. Were you aware of the many people that were praying for you?
I became aware as it went along, and what happened is that the prayer movement was growing, and as it went on, especially in my second year, we became aware that this was really an unprecedented prayer movement. I think that God was really he started it and he was sustaining it. So what really struck me is it was unprecedented in the number of people that were praying, the intensity with which people prayed, and the duration. I thought for sure people would move on to the next crisis. There are many things to pray for,
Sure.
but many people prayed throughout the 2 years. And then the geographical distribution, that it went all over the world. So I think that actually this was one of the reasons, I could say a purpose in my imprisonment, is that I believe God was raising up this great prayer movement, not just to set me free, but to do much more than that, something much bigger, which is what I say is I wrote a wave of prayer out of Turkey, but a tsunami of prayer crashed into Turkey to be a blessing to that country.
But during that process, it's easy to overlook the fact that, I mean, at times things looked hopeless, right?
They did, yes. I didn't know that I would get out. Yeah.
So you thought you could be there for the rest of your life and never see your family again? And
That's what the Turkish government was telling me they were going to do to me. So yes, I did believe that was possible.
your release happened rather dramatically. There was a flurry of activity. Tell us about that.
Well, first, it was in my fourth trial session. I don't think anybody knew whether I'd be released or not. There was hope that I'd be released, but it wasn't clear that I would be. The night before we went to the fourth trial, by then I was under house arrest. The last 2 months I was in Turkey, I was under house arrest. People from the embassy were there, and they were trying to plan, if I were released, how would I get out of the country?
Sure.
And there wasn't an easy way to get me out. And Tony Perkins was there representing USERF as a commissioner, and he contacted the White House, and they then sent a plane to be on standby in Germany. So that was a great help, because when I went to court, actually, I didn't know that I would be released, and I thought the opposite, because I was convicted. I saw that the court was moving towards convicting me. It was unexpected. It was very sudden. But they convicted me of aiding terror groups, and I thought, well, I'm going back to prison. All of this pressure, it hasn't worked, and I'm going back to prison. And then suddenly they said, well, we're letting you go with time served while you appeal. And then there was a race to get me out of the country very quickly, because anything that would offend the Turkish government, a tweet or somebody saying something publicly, could land me back in prison. So I was very relieved to get on that plane, and when we left Turkish airspace, that's when we finally knew, okay, we're free now.
Wow, wow. Amazing. So in 24 hours, you literally went from prison to the White House, you were telling me.
Yeah, this was, it was very surreal to me, because I'm standing in a Turkish court being convicted of terrorism, and a day later, I'm in the White House meeting with President Trump. So
Unbelievable.
quite a roller coaster.
Yeah. What did the president say when you met him?
Yes, he said, would you like some Tic Tacs? And I said, no. And then I thought, wait, the president's offering me some Tic Tacs.
Yeah.
I should take some.
You should take the Tic Tac.
So I ate 2 of them, and I kept 1. I still have it. So.
Okay.
But he was very friendly, and my short experience that I've had with him, I think he has a big heart, and that he genuinely cares about setting people free, like people like me. So. And I'm also told that there was an unprecedented amount of engagement by President in my case. And I'm very grateful for that. And it really took his involvement in imposing sanctions, these unprecedented steps, to set me free.
Because with the State Department, last summer, this time, I was at the first ministerial on religious persecution. It's a conference held for religious leaders on how to, the State Department sponsoring this and for pushing this. And it was your daughter, I think, who was there giving a report on how you were doing, and she spoke to us.
Yes, my daughter was representing the family. My wife stayed in Turkey during my imprisonment. She was the only person who could visit me. So my daughter became the face of the family, and she was at the ministerial. And this year she won't be there, but I will be there.
Unbelievable. Amazing. Well, unusual for the federal government to be doing that, for which I'm very grateful, and I know you are too. But how did this experience change your understanding of religious persecution? You knew about it, surely, because of just the history of the church, but
Yeah,
now it's
just
personal.
from history and also just seeing it in Turkey also, Christians can have a difficult time there. So I was aware of it. But my mother told me something early on, and when I was detained, she was able to visit me. And she said, Andrew, there's a very long line of people who have suffered persecution for the sake of Jesus. So it's a very long line, and it extends 2,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
Son, now it's your turn to stand in that line.
Wow.
So I'd seen it before. I'd had small tastes of it, but this was at a much more intense level for me. So the truth is, though, that persecution is nothing new. Even now, Christianity is being wiped out from the Middle East. So it's happening a great deal. And I think the thing is that we in the West have not experienced it very much. For example, it's very unusual for a Westerner to be arrested for his faith. So we haven't experienced it. But I think we're going to. I think it's coming to this country.
Well, too, as a church historian, Smyrna or Izmir is where Polycarp made his heroic statement of faith before he was martyred, one of the early Christian martyrs. And that's the same city I was telling you that my wife's grandmother fled as a little girl when they were wiping out the Greek population there. So that's the whole experience was pretty riveting just to watch from our perspective. But tell me, in retrospect, what difference did it make having advocates and a sympathetic government working for your release? You've touched on it a little bit, but...
Well, it made a big difference practically because they engaged and they put pressure on and advocated, and that did lead to my freedom. Psychologically, it makes a big difference when I'm in prison, knowing that leaders in my government believe that I'm innocent and that they were fighting for me. So I didn't know that they would be successful,
Sure.
but it helped a great deal to know that they were really trying. So it makes a big difference.
Yeah. And we're talking a lot about religious liberty this weekend. So how did this experience change your understanding about the importance of religious liberty?
I don't think anything really changed because I've been working in Turkey for years, and there isn't the degree of liberty that we would like there.
Right.
But it certainly underlined the importance of it. And actually, I think religious freedom is rare. If we look at history, it's rare. And what we have is so exceptional. It's very unusual. And I think this is very important because many of the values that we have in our country that have led to religious freedom, to liberty, come from the Judeo-Christian stream. Mm-hmm. And our culture is handed down. It's learned. It's not innate. It's something that we pass down, that we teach. The Bible places such an importance on, it says, teaching the children, and the children will teach their children. And so culture is something that we pass down from generation to generation. The values get passed down. If we don't teach them, it means that it only takes one generation to lose them. And this is one of the real challenges, risks in the States now. One of the dangers is that we are not teaching those values. And many people are actually ashamed of them and moving away from them.
Yeah, and that leads to my question of, so what as you reflect on your experience and what you see returning to the United States, what do Americans and American Christians need to understand about religious persecution and religious liberty?
First of all, I think it's coming to the U.S. that there will be persecution. And I was isolated for a couple of years, and coming back to the States is some ways almost coming back to a different country, many ways. And I'm really astounded with the speed with which I think the U.S. is imploding. There are any number of issues where it seems that it's no longer enough for a person of faith to get along with or to serve or to treat well someone they disagree with. And I think that the political, business, media, celebrity classes, also academia, it seems that there's much more of a demand that people of faith approve of, that they validate, that they celebrate things that actually they disagree with. And there are certainly legal challenges, but this is happening more in the public arena. And activists are demanding that businesses and schools punish those who don't agree with them. So I think it's especially Christians who are in the crosshairs with these things. They're the target. And as long as you stay in the church and are quiet, then they'll leave you alone, although I also think this is beginning to change. But outside the church, you're beyond the pale, and you are not supposed to talk about your beliefs, certainly any beliefs based on the Bible. So it seems that there's an effort to marginalize and silence and shame Christians. Now, I contrast that, for example, with what's happening with Muslims in the United States. I don't think that's happening. So, for example, you don't get an LGBTQ activist going into a Muslim bakery in Dearborn, Michigan, demanding that this Muslim create a cake celebrating a wedding that he disagrees with, that according to his belief in the Quran.
Sure.
So I don't think that Muslims should be pressured. I want them to have freedom of religion here. But the Christian is being pressured. So I think that there is some hostility, especially towards Christians. Christians are the ones that are being targeted in this area. So I'm deeply concerned about the direction that our country is heading. And I think of some of the great civilizations. They didn't collapse from external attacks. They collapsed from
Within.
They just corrupted, decayed, and they fell. So the growing hostility to Christianity, to the Judeo-Christian values that have shaped our culture, deeply concerns me. And it used to be more on the elitist fringe, but now it's become much more mainstream. So I think that when I say what should people, we need to prepare for that, have the mentality that are we going to stand for truth? Are we going to stand without shame or without apology? For me as a Christian, for my beliefs. And I think that it's going to become increasingly difficult to do so.
I know as a Christian that you share this historic Christian belief that, you know, the Word of God is not bound, and the gospel has been in chains before, and there has been persecution before, and Jesus said, I will build my church. But coming out of this whole experience, do you think it's important for Christians, for pastors, to stand up and speak out on religious liberty now?
So if they do stand, there will be consequences, there will be opposition. But if they don't stand, there will be, I think, much more serious consequences. And I think especially of pastors, if they want to avoid conflict, the temptation is not to stand for truth, not to teach what the Bible teaches. But there will be serious consequences in the future if they don't.
Andrew, we're so grateful that you could be with us. Thank you so much. We praise God that you're out and pray His blessing upon you. Andrew Brunson, everybody. Thank you.